Archaic Records.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Archaic Records here with you again. My name is Jamie, coming at you from Nashville, Tennessee. And today we're going to be taking a look at the brand new album, Blacked Out, by American sleaze merchants, The Drowns. The Drowns are a band that hail from Seattle, Washington. Now, I've mentioned it in the past on this channel. If you are new to Archaic Records, I just mentioned it in the intro. Yes, I currently live down here in Nashville, Tennessee, but my home and my heart will forever belong in Oakland, California. That being said, if I had to pick a second home, however, it would undoubtedly be in Seattle, Washington. Seattle is a place that I lived for many years on and off between 1999 and 2012. I first moved to Seattle in September of 1999, and when I first landed in the city, I lived in Belltown at the very end of 4th Avenue. I remember moving into my apartment, looking out the window, and literally right across the street from the apartment building I lived in was the historic Seattle Space Needle. I remember thinking to myself, man, how much more Seattle can you get than to live right across the street from the Space Needle? What's interesting to think about now is how cheap that apartment was at the time. Now, this was 1999, and yes, it was a relatively modest apartment, but I remember that apartment was only $500 a month. I can't even imagine what that apartment would go for in Seattle today. Now, in 2002, I left Seattle for a while when I moved to Chicago, a place that I loved as well. But I moved back to Seattle in 2004, and when I arrived back in Seattle, I landed up on Capitol Hill for about a year, maybe a year and a half, and I loved Capitol Hill at the time. But to be perfectly honest with you, I never felt quite as at home on Capitol Hill as I did down in Belltown. So I believe it was in 2005 I found my way back down to Belltown. I moved down to 2nd Avenue, right across the street from the iconic Crocodile music venue, a building that was quite notorious in Seattle at the time. Now, I don't know if this building is still there. I can't imagine that it is. Well, I imagine the building is still there. Culturally, I can't imagine that the building is still there in light of all of the gentrification and all of the change that has gone on, especially in Belltown in Seattle. But the building was called the Rivoli, and it was probably my favorite apartment building I've ever lived in, at least for the time in my life when I lived there. Now, at the time, to even get into the Rivoli, you kind of had to know somebody to get in there. It was sort of a closed community, or at least sort of a tight-knit community, if you will. Fortunately, I had a friend / coworker who lived in the Rivoli and was able to get me a meeting with the super, who basically allowed me to move into the Rivoli. The place was absolutely amazing. It was an apartment building. We all had our own apartments. It wasn't like a communal living situation, but the place had such a great community feel to it. Basically, everybody that lived in the Rivoli back in those days was either like a punk rocker or a shithead or some other sort of social misfit. Of all the places I've lived in my life, I don't know that I ever felt more at home, sadly, I guess, than I did living in that building. Now, I eventually left Seattle in 2012, but it is a place that has remained very near and dear to my heart. It's a place that I always sort of keep tabs what's going on up there, especially in the music scene. Seattle is a place that has some of my favorite music venues I've ever been to. The music scene, as far as I can tell, continues to thrive. Seattle has always had a tremendous, rock and roll culture. That was one of the things that I enjoyed the most when I lived there. That was one of the big draws when I considered moving to Seattle. in the first place. And despite all of the change and all of the gentrification and all of the the chlornization of the city that has gone on, I do believe that rock and roll culture still survives in Seattle. But this band in particular, The Drowns, is a band that I am incredibly interested in. I'm very excited about. I'm interested and excited to see what this band continues to do in the future. I've said this before, but for the continued health and longevity of this scene, we need new and young, exciting bands to continue to put out good records, to continue to bring people into the scene, to keep people that are into the scene interested. Now, this is a band, if you are familiar with, I should say, but you're a fan of bands like the Murder City Devils, Razor Cut, the Wretched Ones, Haymaker, Grade 2. If you like bands like that, I think the Drowns are a band that would be pretty much your luggage. Now, if you are familiar with the Drowns, this newest record, Blacked Out, is a little bit different. I would say it's not quite as punk as the last two. It's a little bit sleazier. It's a little bit greasier. It's a little bit drippier. This record kind of makes you feel like you've been drinking all night in the Safeway parking lot. Now it's 3 o'clock in the morning. You're across the street at the 7-Eleven parking lot, sitting on the curb, eating day-old nachos, looking around and thinking to yourself, man, this fucking rules. This is a band that I first became familiar with back in 2018 when they released their album View from the Bottom, an album I really love. In 2020, this band released an album called Under Tension, which is probably still, my favorite record of theirs. Now, this record, Blacked Out, has only been out for a couple days. I've given it, I think, 3 or 4 listens since it came out. Like I said, it is a little bit different than the last two, but that's cool. That's good. Art, it's a living, breathing entity. It changes, it evolves, and quite frankly, I think that this record, although having only gotten through it a few times so far, I don't like it quite as much as I liked the last record. I think this record is a lot more interesting. It's a lot more diverse in sound. Like I said, they bring influences and elements that weren't necessarily I felt on the last 2 records. The first song on this record is a song called Banger. Now, I have to admit, as far as slang goes, I've never liked the word banger. Every time I hear the word banger, it kind of like stiffens my spine a little bit. I don't know why. The people that use the word banger just sort of annoy me. I don't know. There's something about it I've never liked. But that being said, I do love this song. This song takes influences from, I would say, Kiss, Thin Lizzy, Cheap Trick. You kind of blend that in with a little bit of Dropkick Murphys. And this song is awesome. It's very anthemic. It's, it's very sing-along in your car, fist in the air. Even in my car, which, I don't have a muscle car. I have basically a station wagon. And I was listening to this record the other day driving home. And this song just gets me every time I've heard it so far. Like I said, it's very anthemic, very groovy. It's sort of a combination of Kiss, Thin Lizzy, along with a little bit of Cheap Trick and Dropkick Murphys. I ain't complaining. I love this song. And dare I say, having said what I just said a second ago, I'll say it. This song is a banger, okay? I hate that word. Anyway, the second song off this record is a song called Ketamine and Cola. This is another song I really like a lot. This song has kind of a good 70s vibe, sort of straightforward, degenerate. Maybe it's because of the subject matter of the lyrics of this song, but this song kind of makes you feel a little bit claustrophobic. It kind of makes you feel like you're right on the verge of a little bit of a panic attack. But I think it's just because of the lyrical content to this song. But I really love this song. Like I said, Before, this record isn't quite as punky as some of their earlier stuff. In fact, I would say that this record has a lot more sort of 70s influence, and of course, not 70s punk rock, but 70s influence in terms of things like Kiss and Thin Lizzy and Cheap Trick, and that's another one of those songs, very kind of straightforward, kind of like I said, like, slimy a little bit. And that song, Ketamine and Cola, I remember I was listening to it the first time I listened to that record, it kind of made me uneasy. It kind of made me want to get up and walk around. I started to feel like sort of like claustrophobic from it. The third song on the record is called Dynamite. To me, this is like a good 2024 Kiss song. Kiss hasn't. I don't think Kiss has made a record since 2012. I think was when Monster came out, and that record blows chunks. So this is a great song. This song is. Like I said, it's like to me it sounds like Kiss, maybe just a little bit of like 1980s Slade mixed in just to, sort of, spicing up the recipe. The song Dynamite is great. It's one of my favorite songs on the record. I mean, I would just describe this song as being fun. It's just a great, fun rock and roll song. Maybe just a pinch of Styx mixed in there as well. The next song after that is Just the Way She Goes. This is another song I really like. This song is a little bit punkier than the ones before it on the record. It's a little bit. What it made me think of, and I wrote this down. What it made me think of was, it's sort of like pop street punk. Mixed with the theme song from Laverne and Shirley. That's maybe not a reference you get, but Laverne and Shirley was a show. Took place in Milwaukee, starring Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall, about two young gals who were roommates living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, another city that I have lived in and love, and their misadventures and their two, antagonists, I guess you will, two guys that lived in their same apartment building, Lenny and Squiggy. Eventually, this show became more Lenny and Squiggy centric than it did Laverne and Shirley, which in my opinion made it better, because as much as I love Laverne and Shirley, and I'm off topic, I admit it, but Lenny and Squiggy were the highlight of that show. So if you're a fan of Laverne and Shirley, you'll get that reference. You may not. I mean, I'm an old man, but to me, this song sounds like, kind of, pop street punk mixed with 80s sitcom theme song. I like the song. It's, it's light and crispy. It's poppy, but it's actually one of my favorite songs on the record. Another song I would just say is just a good, straightforward rock and roll song. Fun. Love the sound. Very, unique sounding. You don't hear a lot of songs that sound like this. And that's one thing about this record that I really love a lot, is there's a lot of stylistic changes. These guys aren't necessarily chained to or married to one sound. They sort of experiment. Sometimes it works. Most of the time it works. There's only a couple songs on this record that I don't necessarily love. I pretty much like most of the songs on this record. The next song is the title track off the record, is called Blacked Out. To me, this song sounds most like the Drowns. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is the Drowns, dipshit. Yes, I know what you're saying. But this record is sort of a throwback to the last couple records that I am a big fan of. To me, this is what I expected this record to sound like. If it didn't have so many different sort of, influences and awesome diversity of sound throughout this record. I really love this record, or this song, I should say. This, like I said, is a throwback kind of to me. Like, this sounds more like the Drowns. I know that sounds stupid because this is the Drowns. But to me, this song sounds the most like vintage Drowns. Is that a thing? It's 2018 vintage? I hope not. Really, God, I hope not. Anyway, the next song after that is a song called Yob on a Rampage. I really like this song. It's, again, I love all the sort of different style changes on this record, because To me, this song is sort of like punk southern rock. It's kind of like punk rock meets Georgia Satellites. I like it. It's an interesting sound. I haven't really heard anything really like this song before. That's one thing that I think is cool about this band and about new music in general. I've always said I'm a guy that's in my 40s, but I'm not going to be one of those people who says, there hasn't been a good band since Jethro Tull. Because this is a totally unique song. I love this song. I haven't heard anything like this song before. Now, I'm not a big fan of the Georgia Satellites. I'm not going to say that. In fact, that's a band that, man, they're rough. But the way they use the influence here, it sounds like, with some punk rock in it, I love it. It's also a very Seattle song in the sense that it makes reference to something that always reminds me of Seattle. And I don't know if this is only a Seattle thing, but it reminds me of living in Seattle, and that is one of the opening lines of the song. They mention pull tabs. Now, many years ago when my wife and I first got together, probably about 12 years ago, I took her up to Seattle. She had never been before, I don't think. I don't think she'd been to Seattle before. And of course, I lived there on and off for about 13 or 14 years. And I took her to a place in Seattle up on Capitol Hill called Mario's Pizza. It is one of my favorite places in Seattle, especially one of my favorite places on Capitol Hill. And she had never seen pull tabs before. And like I said, I don't know if this is just like a Washington state thing or if there's other states that do pull tabs, but it's a thing in Seattle. Everybody plays pull tabs. It's sort of like a form of gambling. Basically, you give the bartender a certain amount of money and they give you like this basket and it's got all these things in it. You open them up and then you match them with a prize board, and it's sort of like a little paper slot machine. I'm not describing it well, but I'm not articulate and I'm not smart. Anyway, my wife had never seen pull tabs before, so I was trying to explain it to her. She wasn't really getting it. So I was like, well, try some. Just get some and I'll show you how it kind of works. And I think the pull tabs that she was playing were like a quarter or 50 cents or something like that. And so she gives the bartender $1. It's like, can I have $1 of those pull tabs? And I was sort of like embarrassed. I was like, oh my God, $1. And sitting right down the bar from where we were sitting, there's a guy who had this just heaping basket of pull tabs. You open it, you pull it back, you see if you won or not. You don't. They give you usually 2 baskets. You have the baskets that you buy them in and the baskets you discard them in. And this guy had this huge heaping mound of pull tabs. And my wife bought 4 pull tabs, literally. It was either $1 or $2 worth, but she bought like 4 pull tabs. And I look over at her, and I look over at this guy who's just, frustrated, upset, angry, because he hasn't won anything off of this mound that he bought. And I told my wife, I said, if you win anything off 4 pull tabs, you're an asshole, basically. And sure enough, she pulls it back. And I think she won like $100 off the pull tab. And I remember distinctly the death glare given to us by the gentleman down the bar who had probably dropped maybe a bill or 2 on pull tabs. He was not very happy with us. I was happy just in the sense that my wife's winnings paid for our night out. I was very grateful for that. She loves telling that story. How she won pull tabs, basically playing 4 of them. Won like $100. And Joe Schmo down at the end of the bar was not very amused or pleased with us, I have to tell you. The next song after that is a song called 1979 Trans Am. I think if I had to pick a weakest song on the record, this might be it. And it's not a bad song at all. It's just a song that does a little bit less for me than some of the other songs on this record. To me, this song is kind of a hybrid between, like Thin Lizzy and Eddie Cochran, 2 artists I love. But this song, like I said, it's not a bad song. The song just does very little for me. And this record is so good. 95% of this record is so good that, having one song, and this isn't even like clunkage. This is just a song. It's like, no, it's not my favorite thing in the world. But I do like the sort of Thin Lizzy influence, especially on the guitar work. I mean, that's the other thing about this band is, I didn't mention that they are all tremendous musicians. Great guitar playing on this song. It's just, for me, if you have to pick one weakest song off a record, I would say it's 1979 Trans Am, at least in my opinion. The next song after that is a song called All Charged Up. Man, we're right back into the jugs on this record because this song rules. This is one of my favorite songs on the record. It's very, punky. I love the story in the song. I love the lyrics of this song. This song this reminds me about, so many of my good memories living in Seattle, having your favorite, dive bar, seeing that rocker chick from across the room that just was so snug. Man, the way they describe the place they're hanging out in this song, it makes me homesick for living in Seattle. It reminds me of how I met one of my ex-girlfriends. Now, this relationship, mind you, went way sour, so I'm not necessarily sentimental over it, but it does remind me of the way that I met one of my ex-girlfriends. In the song, he talks about this girl who puts Kiss on the jukebox. He describes her as being this, rocker chick. She's just like, the jugs. And I remember I met my ex-girlfriend one night at a bar in Seattle. We were actually in Ballard. It was a night I didn't even want to go out, actually. It was at a place in Ballard, and one of my coworkers was in a band that wasn't particularly, my luggage. But I agreed to go, and then if you ever done that thing where it's like, at noon, you're like, yeah, man, we'll all go out and just tear the night apart, and then by, 9 o'clock at night when you get off work, you're like, I don't want to go, God. That was how I was feeling, but I agreed to go, and I was like, I'll go, I mean, you didn't have to twist my arm to, go out drinking back in those days. So I go to this thing, and my friend's band, with all due respect, coworker, really, he wasn't really a friend, but a coworker, their band was pretty rough. Not the worst band I've ever had by a coworker, mind you, but they were pretty rough. And I was just kind of disinterested in what they were doing. I was just kind of mingling around, and I noticed out of my side eye over here, I noticed a girl standing at the bar, and I only saw her really from the back. But on the back of her jacket, she had a back patch of Only Theater of Pain by the band Christian Death. And Christian Death is a band that I've loved for a very long time. It's a band I was listening to a lot back in those days. And I never approach girls in bars. That's never been my thing. I'm way too self-conscious. I'm way too shy. That's not really my thing. But for some reason, maybe I was bored of the show. I was disinterested in everything else that was going on. I went over to this girl, and I remember I tapped her on the shoulder, and she had on the Christian Death back patch. I wasn't going to do the name 3 songs thing, but I was like, let me ask you a question. She's like, what? I was like, who is the only actual singer of Christian Death? And without batting an eye, she said, Roz Williams. And from that moment on, my heart was hers. At least for a while. But that's what it reminds me of, that song. It's just hanging out in your favorite scuzzy dive bar with warm beer and cold food and scumbag clientele and shitty bartenders. The song All Charged Up, man. This song is the jugs. This is one of the best songs on the entire record. This is a song that makes me want to run out. See, Nashville, I should say, doesn't have great dive bars like Seattle at least used to. I don't know if Seattle still has great dive bars, but back in those days, man, you could go to the Monkey Pub, you could go to the Rendezvous before they all remodeled it. Even Shorty's was an awesome dive bar. I remember I used to work on the Ave. Now, if you're a Seattle person, you'll get that reference. And there was a place on the Ave called Earl's Now, it's probably still there, but Earl's was way up the Ave, right around 47th Street for a long time, and I worked up a little bit past it, up near 50th. And then Earl's, they moved, and it became more of like a college bar. It's more of like a sports bar, frat bar, at least the last time I was up in Seattle. But man, Earl's on the Ave used to just be putrid, man. You walk in there, you know you're walking out with hepatitis. I love those places. That's what that song reminds me of. It's just like the best nights ever. Probably my favorite place back in those days. Because I worked, even though I lived in Belltown, the whole time I lived in Seattle, I worked in the U District. I worked on the Ave. And I remember my favorite place to hang out in Seattle back in those days was the Monkey Pub. It was just this nasty, awesome punk rock dive bar. I don't even know if it's still there anymore. But that's what it reminds me of. Anyway. The next song after that is a song called Chancer. Man, another song I love. This song is kind of an interesting sound dynamic to me. It's like if you take Motorhead and you mix it with like Huey Lewis and the News. Now you think to yourself, that sounds terrible. No. It sounds awesome to me. And you mix in a little bit of Stray Cats. Man, this song rules. This song is just, I think it's just about basic douchery. Now, the way I interpret this song, and I don't know that it's necessarily meant to be written like this, but the way I interpret this song is, especially being somebody who's from the Bay Area, San Francisco, Oakland, and then I lived in Seattle for a long time. I interpret this song to be, aimed more at like gentrifiers, people that move into cities. I'm not saying they don't have any place there because everybody's welcome everywhere, but I'm talking about people that move into a place and they kill the culture. They really aren't invested in the city. They aren't there to make the city a better place. They're basically there to make their money and go to shitty wine bars, and they really just like kill the culture of the city. They don't have any, consideration for a neighborhood or the history of a neighborhood. I remember when I was living in Oakland back before my wife and I moved to Nashville. I worked in San Francisco for a long time, and I worked right on the edge of the Castro in San Francisco. Now, if you know the history of the Castro in San Francisco, it has a lot of history there. It has sort of a demographic identity. It's one of the big gay neighborhoods in San Francisco. And I used to talk to people all the time in my place of employment who had lived in the Castro forever. And it wasn't just that their apartment was their home or their house was their home, but the neighborhood was their home. It's where they felt safe. It's where they felt like they belonged. A lot of these people moved to the Castro from places where they didn't feel as accepted. They didn't feel welcome or safe. And I heard all the time, like, man, all these like people are just moving in and they're pricing everybody out. And I'm just like clinging to not only my home, like my apartment, my bed, my windows, but I'm clinging to my home in terms of like my neighborhood. That's what this makes me think of, because I met people all the time back then in San Francisco who were moving into places like the Castro or the Mission or the Haight-Ashbury, and they had no idea of the history of the neighborhood. They couldn't have possibly cared less about the people who lived there. They couldn't have possibly cared less about the people that they were displacing. And in Seattle, like I said, when I lived on 2nd Avenue right across the street from the Crocodile, I remember the Crocodile, which if you haven't been to Seattle, if it's still there, which I'm pretty sure it still is, the Crocodile is one of the coolest music venues in one of the coolest music cities in America. And after a while, the Crocodile was always fighting with these new, Amazon and Microsoft type people who were moving into the neighborhood. It's like, why did you move in next door to a music venue if you just want to, be that guy? That's what this song makes me think of. This song, I think it's very well written. I think it's very poignant. And if you've lived in a place like I have, where you've been displaced by people who don't give a shit about you, it sort of touches a nerve. So I applaud the Drowns for the song Chancer. I love it. The next song after that is a song called Wheels. This song is very sort of back in the kind of pop punk feel to it. This song reminds me of a cross between kind of the Archies and the Mr. T experiences, or Mr. T experience, I should say. No complaints on either of those fronts, as far as I'm concerned. I love the production on this song. It's clean, it's crispy, it's light. I really love this song a lot. The next song after that is a song called Don't Have a Job. I like this song. It's very self-explanatory in the lyrical content. To me, it sounds very Kiss. I do like it. As I said before, I think the song 1979 Trans Am is probably the weakest song on the record, at least in my opinion. This might be my second, but I like it a lot more than 1979 Trans Am. To me, this is a good song. To me, it sounds very, very Kiss influenced. The last song on this record is a song called Born to Die in New York City, or NYC, however you want to say it. A very cool song. Very slow piano. The piano, it's interesting. I was listening to this record today as I was writing this review, and the piano, now, maybe I'm just mishearing it. I'm not a musician. I admit that I don't know anything about studio tricks. But to me, it sounds like the piano is just slightly out of tune, which actually creates like a really cool effect. This is a dark, miserable song. And like I said, I don't know if the piano is like out of tune or what it is, but the way the piano is tuned just complements this song. It's just something about it that works. It's one of my favorite songs on the record. Now, I don't know if this song's written about anybody, specifically, but basically it's a very tragic song about, dying too young. It makes me think of course, this is a record, so it makes me think of musicians. I'm always thinking of musicians. So it makes me think of people like Dee Dee Ramone, Johnny Thunders, Stiv Bators. Of course, Stiv Bators, not all these people died in New York City, but that's what it makes me think of. Like I said, if you go back and if you listen to this record, the last song, Born to Die in NYC, listen to the piano. Am I wrong in saying that it sounds sort of just slightly out of tune? It's like disturbing, but it's fucking awesome. However they did the piano in this song, I'm a big fan of, fellas. Anyway, that is the last track on the record. I really love this record. I highly recommend you go out and check it out. I do not think that you will be disappointed. Remember that your relationship with music is a two-way street. Yes, it's the artist's responsibility to put out quality records, and keep the scene moving forward, but it's our responsibility as fans to support these artists. And if this is a record that you go out and listen to and you like it, buy a record, buy a CD, buy a shirt. This band comes to your town, go support their live show. No, I get it. Times are tough. Money is tight. Dollars don't go as far as they used to, but it is important. I think it's important anyway. I drove all over Nashville today looking for this record to buy on vinyl. Nowhere I went to today had it, so I had to order it. Unfortunately, I wish I had it in my hand today, but it will be here soon. It's unfortunate that I wasn't looking for anything by Morgan Wallen or Jelly Roll. Otherwise, all the record stores here in Nashville had me covered. By the way, when did Morgan Wallen become such a big thing? I mean, I am not a fan of country music, especially that wing of country music. But when did Morgan Wallen become such a big thing? When he became a big thing. When he became a big thing. People here in Nashville will deny it. But a couple years ago, Morgan Wallen was caught on video by one of his neighbors dropping some N-bombs. Now, in his defense, he was drunk, and I think he was talking to one of his friends, thinking that he was being cute and using slang. But it seems like there's like a wing of the country music fan base that when he got caught doing that, they were all in. They were like, bink! Not accusing anybody of anything. All I'm saying is I went out looking for the Drowns record earlier today, and all I could find was Morgan Wallen and Jelly Roll. Puke-O-Rama. Anyway, if you don't believe me, I ordered it. I'll show it to you when it gets here. It'll be here in a couple days. Anyway, man, go out and support this record. Check out this record, Blacked Out by the Drowns. This is a record that I was very excited about when it was announced. Like I said, I first discovered this band back, I think it was in 2018, and I love their record from 2020. The record from 2018, I have to go back, it was called View from the Bottom. I love that record. Under Tension, as of now, right now, is still my favorite record of theirs. But check out Blacked Out. This record is pretty snug. In my opinion, I do not believe that you will be disappointed at all in this record. And if this band comes to your town, I have had the opportunity to see the Drowns one time live. I have to throw this out there before I get out of here. These guys are great live. They have a great energy. They really love what they do. You can tell it comes through in their live performance. They are tight. They are great musicians. They're a lot of fun. And hopefully they will be coming to my neck of the woods on this tour. Now, I've mentioned in the past, some of these bands, Nashville isn't necessarily the best market for some of these bands live. They might come to Nashville, but if they happen to hit, Memphis, Birmingham, Atlanta, any of those, I'm willing to travel to go see this band because I do believe in these guys. I think they are one of the most exciting and interesting bands going. I was very excited about this record when it was announced, and I am not at all disappointed. Anyway, man, thank you so much for checking out this video. This is Archaic Records. My name is Jamie, coming at you from Nashville, Tennessee. Be sure to go out and support your local record store. Check back every week for Morrissey Monday, my weekly celebration of all things Morrissey and the Smiths, as well as other record content and album reviews throughout the week. And until next time, my friends, I'll talk to you then.